Welcome everyone to the Voice of the Terminus show. In the left corner you have Yarnila, one of the hosts. In the right corner you have Lexa, the other geezer. And in the centre we have Arius with us today, who's going to be joining us to talk about the Paladin class. He's had a lot of experience playing the Paladin from a perspective in World of Warcraft. And before we kick off the whole discussion and everything, we're going to bring up some of the announcements and bring up the disclaimer and talk about the moderators. Frogzor in chat will basically be moderating our show today. If you have any questions or ideas while we go through the show, please make your remarks towards Frogzor. She'll try and note them down and then bring them up later on in the show when we get to the open chat, where we will discuss some of your thoughts and ideas. Zathras is also with us, a moderator you can contact for information, etc. So one disclaimer that I want to quickly announcement I'm going to bring up is we've been thinking lately ways to get you guys all more involved in the show, and we've come up with a document, and I'm going to bring this up on screen right now. And get rid of that. You don't need to see that. This document that is now on the screen can be acquired by our open Google Drive. You can basically download it with the help of the show calendar that we have. The next one will be released next week, hopefully, for the coming months. You can basically pick out the topic you want to get involved in, add the show number, the date that the stream's going to be, put down your questions that you think you would like to see brought up on the show, and then you have your ideas at the bottom where you can fill in your ideas and thoughts, etc. And then once you fill that all out, you save the document, and then you can send it to us if you're on our Discord server directly as a direct message to myself, or you can send it in per email to my email address, and I'll give you guys that right now. No naughty stuff, okay? I don't want to, open up my email account later and find.
So no more halfling fan erotica.
Yeah. So that's the email address you can also send it to, and we will try and bring up these questions then on that show, depending on how much input we get. If we don't bring up a question that you have basically, put up there, don't worry, we'll bring it up on a later show, because we're bound to do more than one on all these topics. So that's the serious note on the announcement. Then we have the disclaimer. We, the Voice of Terminus, are not developers. We're not paid for or paid by VR to do these shows. We're here because we're committed to what they are trying to do, and to help promote their game and talk about all the things related to Pantheon, speculate on most of it because there's not a lot of information currently, and we do hope to help other people think of ideas, ways to contribute and get interested in the game. So that's our disclaimer. Now, funny note, as you guys recently saw last week, I put a tweet out with my t-shirt, "This is gonna rock," with the silhouette of Brad, exactly, and then Brad tweeted back that he wants one and everything. So obviously, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and get Brad one. So I told the guys in our guild, look, I've got Brad this shirt. I've ordered it and everything, so it came today, and I was going to send it out. It's right here, Brad, if you're watching. It's right here. I was going to send it out, but the guild, stopped me there on the spot. They demanded that I do not send it out, and the person you need to contact about this is Frogzor on Twitter. She basically illustrated all this and said, look, if he wants that shirt, he's got to go through me first and meet the demands that she's put forward to release the shirt and forward it to you. So get in contact with Frogzor, and she'll let you know how to get this shirt and to free me to be able to go and ship it out, because the VOT guys, they were in uproar when I was about to go in, bring it to the post office, and they said, look, if you do that, we're going to beat you up. And you see me, guys, on the show. I had a scar last time. That was from Lex. He can slap me just by going, just by raising his hand on the screen. I get, scars everywhere. So, Brad, if you want your shirt, it's here, mate. But my hands are tied until you meet the demands. Yeah, that's a joke. I sent it out, Brad. Of course I did. His shirt's on it. Shirt's on the way. Have fun.
He's got to deal with frogs around. He's not gonna contact me. I'll be like, what?
Right. So anyway, let's get on with the show. All fun aside now. All seriousness. So we're here to talk about the Paladin. As you guys might have heard, a few months back, VR decided to take the Crusader and the whole approach that they had, and they decided to basically go, right, we're not getting anywhere with the Crusader, we're not, or the visions that we have are completely different than what we expected, so they decided to go and bring in the traditional Paladin class again, and we're here to talk about that now. So, once a cleric, the Paladin has a call transcending the customs of the cleric order, led by her convictions. She sets off to carry out her own righteous judgment. So that's basically the description of the Paladin. Now, after hearing that, guys, after reading the description and hearing what you just heard me say, what's your take on the Paladin? How do you see this class in Pantheon? And I'll lead this question first towards our guest Arius. What's your take on this description when you hear it, the Paladin?
Well, I guess when I'm reading that, I with the game itself, they're going to a new world and everything like that. I would think maybe they separated themselves away from the church and they're serving that higher calling, where the clerics are still serving the church and maybe not the higher calling, and the paladins are really going out and they're judging on their own because they have that higher insight from that higher calling, where the clerics are following the church.
Okay. Lex, what about you?
Well, just because of my background with D&D, old EverQuest, and all these other old games, cleric has always come off to me as a passive, almost like a passive job. You're there to heal. You're not there to hurt people. Well, the paladin has always come off as the cleric who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, who wants to be more aggressive or more active, but still use that action in the means of preserving others.
Right, so for me, I was kind of like, a bit conflicted reading it, because, what put me completely off was led by her own convictions, or by her convictions, she sets off to carry out her own righteous judgment. Now, technically, paladins would work for, the cleric order. They would go out and do what the clerics demand of them. They would go out and fulfill the cleric's righteous judgment and not their own. So it's I'm kind of on the fence, like, the way this is described to me sounds like, the paladins are getting a little bit of extra pinch and salt and pepper towards them. They're going to be kind of like, not the paladins that we've all come to know and mock in all the games out there, because paladins get picked on all the time. Hey, you're not really a tank, you're not a healer, blah blah blah, you're nothing, right? But now with the way they describe this, it sounds almost like they're going to give them a little twist, where they, we're going to go out, and if you're a bad boy, and if I think you're a bad boy, I'm going to kick your ass.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that description that they give you is almost a little misleading. Because when you think paladin, you think the white knight, the knight in shining armor, here to save the day. The description that they give you almost makes you believe, like, I'm here to pass my judgment, but I don't care what the gods say. If I think you're bad, and you're going to burn, kind of thing. And you're just like, that don't really sound like something a Halo scrubbing paladin would do.
Right,
And
so
I,
go on, Aries.
I took it as a little bit different. Maybe that the cleric order is going a different way, and they're maybe doing their own convictions,
Mm.
and the paladin has now made that connection to the higher up, and that is who's telling them, and they're judging. They're making their own judgment, not the clerics, because the higher ups are telling them the clerics are doing this for themselves and not to serve the better cause.
Cool. So let's go and bring up the next one. Would you like to see the traditional paladin that you know from EverQuest, or would you like to see something new done with the Pantheon paladin? And I'll start with you, Lex.
That's a tough question. I mean, when you think about it, there was nothing wrong with the old school paladins. They had their own seat in the gallery of tanks. You know, they were very good at what they did, and no one else did what they did any better. But this is 2017. You know, this isn't 1999. This isn't 2005. I do think that maybe there could be a lot of room to experiment and maybe try something different. But the old school gamer in me, I kind of want to bring back the Paladin the way they were, bring them their own little slice of glory like they used to have. Not like, and I'm sorry, Ares, not like the World of Warcraft Paladins that were just a bane of my existence from day one.
Okay, so what about you, Aries? From your perspective, playing a paladin mainly in World of Warcraft, what's your take? Would you like to see something more traditional? I don't know if you ever played EverQuest or EverQuest 2, but would you like to see something more traditional? How paladins are seen throughout most of the MMOs, or would you like to see something different?
Oh, I'd like to see something different, especially away from the EverQuest way where they were only tanks. I mean, I usually play a healer, so a pally healer. I'd really like to see him do a new shake on it too, not your traditional healer standing in the back of everything. I want to see him up in it because using their heavy armor and maybe heals based on proximity to their targets, and that way that heavy armor makes sense and they're not just cloth wearers, and it doesn't make any sense for them to wear heavy
Mm.
armor. So I want to see him that frontline medic that I don't think that they've seen before in their class.
Mm. Yeah, for me myself, like I like to see them add a bit more flavour to the paladin, give him a few more options, and restrict him of some things. But we'll get into that a bit later. But I'm looking for something more this time. Add a bit of flavour, a bit of pinch, a bit of salt, a bit of pepper towards him. Make him something that's his own force and something to be reckoned with, and to be frightened of. So another fun question. This was from Smarty actually, who brought up this idea yesterday when we was preparing for the show. So as we know, there's only dwarves and humans that will be able to play Paladin in Pantheon. Now, from his perspective, it was basically, what if Paladins never existed until they got to Terminus? It was something that was created by the dwarven race and the human race to kind of lay down the law a bit. So what about from looking at it from that perspective? How would you see it then? How would you see your paladin then? If you took that into perspective, that paladins never existed before, without having the images or the knowledge of what you know from other previous MMOs. Just say this the first time, boom.
Saying it that way actually kind of makes me feel like maybe the paladin is almost like a social enforcer.
Mm.
Like you're there to enforce order. But the thing is, well, I was going to say, that's kind of an aggressive description to a class that might not necessarily actually be that aggressive. Because to me, the Dire Lord is what screams aggressive tanking, or at least aggressive melee. So I'm really conflicted because I don't think that a paladin should be strictly defensive. But my traditional ideas of a paladin have always said defensive, heals, buffs, shields, stuff like that, So
Yeah.
I'm very conflicted, especially on this
It's,
topic.
it's definitely a tough question as well. It's a good question. That's why I thought this would be a good twist as well. So same goes to you, Aries. Imagine now, for the first time you're seeing this paladin class. It's something that's happened because Terminus needed somebody on the good side to lay down the law. So the same goes to you. How would you see the paladin from that perspective?
Well, that perspective, I'd see it. I could kind of compare it to when I'm thinking maybe like the Old West. Your sheriff was someone that just came to be, that was to keep the good in it. He didn't have anyone really overseeing him. It was just that group that kind of stepped up. So I could see it kind of being like that. Maybe in this new Terminus, they lost touch with who they were serving, so they're relying on themselves, and that's where that judgment comes from, where they gotta go out and make their own judgment on what they believe is good and right.
Cool. Yeah.
It would be very interesting to think of the paladins as almost like their own separate sect away from the church, like you would think for a cleric, where maybe they start off as part of the church, but now at the point where we're playing in Terminus's history, they've actually branched off to become their own organization, and they basically enforce the law their own way.
Yep. So let's go and talk about the Paladin himself and what weapons would paladins use from your perspectives, and we'll start with you, Arius.
Oh, I've always been a fan of paladins in World of Warcraft with the one two-handed big mace, with the big head and with the gold on it and the fancy designs on where it connects the mace to the handle. Something big and fancy that demands attention. I really like that in that look of a paladin.
What about you, Lex?
I'm very, like I said, everyone knows I'm very traditional in my MMOs. I see the paladin as sword and board, sword and shield. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, it's kind of
primarily.
It's kind of the same for me. I'd give him a malice or something like that. Maybe those big massive meat cloppers.
Maces.
Yeah, mace things. Yeah, whatever you call them. That's
beat sticks is what I call them.
Something like that, and definitely a shield. Definitely shield. Now, on that note, related to the weapons, would you see a difference in choice of weaponry between a dwarven paladin and a human paladin? Just a side question. And
I honestly don't think so. We don't really know a whole lot in terms of racial or class restrictions, but I don't see any reason why they would do that. Because although dwarves are smaller in stature than a human, stereotypically they tend to be a lot stockier and a lot stronger. So their shorter height doesn't mean they can't carry that big, gigantic maul. It just means that they have a lower center of gravity, so maybe they get a little more leverage on that sucker.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
What about you, Aris? Do you think there'll be any differences in weaponry choices for dwarves or humans?
I actually really like that idea that you brought up. I would like to see it because someone that is smaller in stature compared to someone, even if they're more bulky, they're going to have an advantage with a different weapon, and just saying even if they're with their races and everything like that, maybe they do have specializations in different things where a dwarf might use an axe because it's traditional dwarf when I think of dwarf, and where your human's going to use a long sword, or maybe your dwarf uses a smaller sword, like a short sword, to get the same fastness and stuff, that quickness that a human would get out of it.
Cool.
It would be very interesting to see racial benefits, like say a dwarf paladin. Say paladins can only use swords and blunt weapons, but because it's a dwarf and your stereotypical dwarf has an affinity towards axes, maybe a dwarf paladin could actually transcend that restriction on paladin and still carry an axe. I mean, it would be a tiny little bit of mixed in the pot, but I think it'd be a little refreshing.
So Lex kind of basically answered the follow-up question after this already, so I'll leave him out when we get to that point.
Do better, baby.
What would your Paladin look like armor-wise, gear-wise? How do you picture the Paladin when you see him for the first time? You know, what's he going to be wearing? We'll start with you, Aries.
I imagine gold armors, plate armors, big bulky ones, but very eccentric. Actual decals on it or paint, and really, when you see him, you say, "Oh, that is someone that represents what the Paladin is."
Mm-hmm.
So when you see him, maybe an insignia or a tabard on him, so he just stands out from the crowd. So you go, someone that you can go to for help, and you can see.
All right, and I'll answer now. We'll give Lex a little timeout. I also see him like in shiny armor. You all remember the stream, or might have seen the stream that they did a few weeks back. Aradun had that green armor on, right? Now, not obviously wearing green, but the little details on that armor. That's what I kind of would like to see. The Paladin's armor to be like, and an emblem, something like an insignia that you can definitely see. That stands out, and from a distance, you'll automatically know, hey, whoa, that's a Paladin coming towards me. It's the guy at the top of the hill that you look up and you go, whoa, yep, okay. Because for me, Paladins are like, they're the honorary guards. They're the last men. They're the top-notch knights. The last guy standing there fighting, and trying to save everybody else, and this, that, and the other. That's how I kind of picture them. Like the natural heroes in shining armor, in like a silver, white tone, or silver gold kind of mix. Like that's how I kind of picture them. So Lex, what about you?
Well, I'm also going to go into a little bit of the style of the armor because I see plate and chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to compare this because to me, Dire Lords are their polar opposite, almost like their mirror. We said back in the Dire Lord show that we see spikes and ridges and sharp edges and stuff. I see the exact opposite for the Paladins. Obviously, I see nice smooth lines, very stylized, lots of engravings, perhaps holy symbols, a lot of silvers, golds, perhaps a little bit of brass in there, but very almost ceremonial style plate armor that's just very, very aesthetically pleasing.
Yep, cool. So, go on.
My favorite Paladin armor that I've ever seen has always been the original World of Warcraft, where they got the lion side, where they have a big lion head on the shoulder. I mean, it's very iconic. You think of that, you think Paladin.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. It's these iconic symbols, like Lex said, holy symbols and stuff like that is definitely something that you'll definitely want to see. So Lex already kind of answered gave his answer to this. I'll give him time to think if he wants to add something to it. So, what differences could you see, if any, between the dwarf and the human paladin in traditional traits and stuff like that? Would you think that there will be differences between the two races when it comes to the paladin? And we'll go with you, Arius, because Lex already kind of shot the bullet.
Oh yeah, I mean, just because they're different races, I would think that they could do something where, maybe the dwarf, if he's tanking, has more of a armor rating, where the humans more can have dodge in there, where it equals out the same. It'll be the same tank type of thing, but their racial kind of, that's how they're going to tank. Healing wise, I'd say they'd probably heal the same because, you're focusing in on that. It's not focusing on your race.
Lex, you got anything to add to that?
Not really, because when you compare differences between a human paladin and dwarf paladin, we're not really saying the difference between the class, because a paladin is a paladin is a paladin. What we're actually saying here is what are the different racial traits that might be seen as possibly contradictory to the paladin class, such as, say, maybe paladins just have an aversion to using axe weapons. Well, dwarves, if we go stereotypical, because we know the dwarves aren't the typical ones from every other game, dwarves love access. So maybe that racial trait of a dwarf would transcend its restriction because it is still a martial weapon. Now, I'm not saying that you would see like a dwarf who's a priest carrying a two-handed axe. I mean, that's obviously just probably not going to happen. It'd be silly and enjoyable for about 2 minutes. But if we go racial like attributes and such, what we know for sure that we're going to see is we're probably going to see the dwarf paladin being more resistant to cold because they are from a cold climate versus the humans. Humans are obviously going to be more versatile, more well-rounded, good to suit anything. Paladins traditionally being shorter, stockier, very what's the word I'm looking for? Just very, very sturdy type of people. It's pretty safe to assume that they would have a higher strength, possibly a higher stamina or constitution, whichever they decide to go, because I can't remember. So they probably have more hit points. So maybe a dwarf would be more min-maxer's preferred race for a paladin if you were tanking, whereas a human might be more preferable if you wanted to heal, if we are given that option.
Okay. I'm going to get to a kind of touchy question now. Should paladins be able to resurrect? And Lex is already shaking his head, so we'll go with you, Lex. Let's get your take on paladin and rezzing. Should the paladins be able to resurrect?
Now, EverQuest 1 paladins could resurrect because a level 20 paladin was a level 10 warrior and a level 10 cleric. So they got all those spells for that level 10 cleric. Eventually meaning that they could get the resurrection spells. I don't see the harm in them resurrecting, but only at high levels. Perhaps it'll be something they have to specialize in. I would also like to see them get their own version of a resurrect versus just piggybacking on a cleric spell. That would possibly be a longer cast time. Maybe it takes a lot more mana. Maybe it takes a percentage of mana. Maybe you can only cast it once because of how much it takes, and then you got to sit down and you got to rest or meditate or whatever they want to call it. But I don't think it's something that should be available until much later on if they allow it.
Right, before we let Arius answer, I'll give my answer as well. For me personally, I feel that they have lost that right. Once being a cleric and then, leaving that part of their life, they kind of lose that right. They have, basic understanding of being a cleric, but something like, resurrecting, something that takes years and years and years to kind of learn to manage and do. So by leaving the clergy, they automatically lose that right to res. But also for this, later on when we get to speculation, I have a compromise. So do not chop my head off yet, because I will say, for me personally, no, they shouldn't be able to res from the get-go. And if any, it would be something, like you said, almost similar to you, that would come further down the line. So, Arius, your take. Should paladins be able to res?
I love the idea where you're gonna go with this later, so I'll wait for that too. But I love that idea you had yesterday of where that's going, of the ability to res in that aspect. So, but just on normal, the only I could care yes or no. It doesn't matter to me if they can resurrect. The only thing that I hope it would be, they're not the only healer that can't resurrect, because I think that put them at a disadvantage. But if it equaled out like what you're gonna go into later, I'd be totally for it, because that just sounds like an awesome skill that we've never seen anything like it. Like, I'd be really excited to see where you're gonna go in this game. It's gonna be cool if they bring that in.
Yeah.
So
we actually got a very interesting comment in chat here about what about lay on hands as a full heal and or a res.
Well, we'll talk about that later. I'm sure our little moderator Fogzor is looking at stuff like that. So, moving on. How involved should Paladin heals be towards a group and single members? Should the Paladin be able to intervene in the healing aspect of the game towards the group or single member? How involved should he be on that part of his way of being? And we'll start with you, Arius. So that question, how involved should a Paladin be towards healing, in the group aspect and the single player aspect?
I think that depending on how you spec, you should be able to do either a single target or a group, depending on how you spec, so you can kind of be an off healer or a healer. But like I said, I'd like to see them up in that front line where they're up hitting the boss with whatever weapon that they do go with. But a proximity heals, if you're closest to those melee people, those are who you're doing most of the heals to. And where, your other healers that are ranged will be taking care of the ranged people and spot healing in on the melee people, but you getting bonuses for being close to them. Mm-hmm. And then I think that would just really justify them having to wear that plate armor.
What about you, Lex?
I've never really played a Paladin other than level, 35 or 40 in EverQuest. I've never played one in WoW. I've never healed with one, so I'm pretty much just shooting in the dark here.
All right.
But
so, go
on. If a Paladin is going to be a healer, I know in WoW they're pretty much like the single target spam. He'll just whoosh 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 whoosh. Oh yay! I want to see something different. I want to see something akin to Warhammer Online. They had melee healers. Now, you don't have to necessarily do the target system like they did. Maybe you could turn a Paladin into a melee healer with procs or effects and such, and turn them into more of a group sustained heal.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of doing your typical, what's the word I'm looking for? Playing Gopher with or what's it called? Pop-up game.
Yeah, smack the gopher. Whack-a-mole, yeah.
Bars. That's it.
All right, so again, from my perspective, this is something as well where I see the Paladin losing that right to intervene in group or single healer encounters. But again, to all fairness, I always compromise. So we have another idea for that, what we'll bring up in a minute. What I think he should be able to do, though, is definitely, take care of himself. He should be able to have his, self-heal, etc. Doing that, that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to the healing aspect, that's why I pull the limit and say, hey, you were once a cleric, you're not anymore. You do not have that ability anymore. That's where my viewpoint is on how I would go about this. So let's go and move on, because we've got two more questions that we can get into the rest of it. Should Paladin abilities be more group or single focused? I've played in EverQuest 2, Pally. It was a lot of group focused spells, a lot of AEs and stuff like that. So with that in mind, how would you like to see the abilities that they have and their focus be towards more group focus spells or more single focus spells? And we'll start with you, Arius.
Well, I would prefer a single focus, but I think that with the playstyle of them, it's got to be more of the AoE and stuff. It's them channeling the energy, and it's coming out of them from whatever is giving them that energy of what they're being able to do to be a paladin, and it's overflowing and so much. So like your concentrates on the ground, and things that are just you're affecting the whole environment by channeling that energy. So I think the playstyle would have to be an AoE sort of damage and more than single target, where you can still do some single target, but a lot of it's coming from AoE.
What about you, Lex?
Well, I've competed against Paladin tanks in WoW, and they were all AE, basically press one button, walk away from the computer, look, everything's dead. That always bugged me, because to me, tanking multiples was always a thing of skill. always bragging rights in a way. I would like to see them like the old school EverQuest manner where like they had amazing one-on-one aggro, like out of this world. Don't matter what abilities you got, if it's only one guy, you are not pulling it off that Paladin. I would love to see that again. That would make them so great for just about everything, and it leaves room for the really skilled player to be able to hold multiple easily.
All right,
but
cool.
you got to work at
it. For me myself, I really can't commit right now to saying I want to see the typical AOE focused, group focused kind of stuff, or single. I would basically have to wait and see once we hear more about him or her, and go from there. A final question, and then we'll get into the speculation stuff, the ideas and thoughts. And this is more related to the general perspective of tanks. So this goes not just for the Paladin, but for the Dire Lord and for the Warrior as well. So if you would you like to see different tanking trees for the individual tanks? So like a defense tree, an offense tree, maybe a support DPS tree kind of thing. Would you like to see tanks have these options available to them to kind of fulfill different roles within a group? So you got your main tank, then you got somebody who's you take a second tank with you and he takes on like a more of an offense stance or a support stance, or maybe even dabble in a bit of DPS. Would you like to see something like that? And we'll start with you, Lex.
I'm going to approach this one as just a general tank answer, because I think all the tanks should have the ability to specialize their tank character to how they want to tank. If you want to tank lots of trash mobs, but have a hard time on single target, that's fine. Do it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do the opposite, if you want to be that amazing like raid boss tank, but have a heck of a time on trash, that's fine. Whatever you want to do with your character. But I think every tank should actually have that option to be able to customize how you aggro, how you fight, how you do your job. Because not everyone does it the same way.
What about you, Aries? What's your take on that?
I love the thought of having different trees on that. It makes it a more rounded character. You can get into more groups that way. If you want to play a Paladin, it's not a cookie cutter. You got to build it this way. You can build how you would like to need for the group, and you can even, you can make it super specialized, or you can make it more, you're not good in anything, but you're not bad at anything. You're just very rounded, and you can fill those little holes that needed filled, where your group might not be going off if you didn't have that filled. And I think it matches with the lore too, that you're taking in that power from a higher up and you're bending it to your will however you want. So you would be able to bend that to be able to say, well, I'm going to be really good at single target tanking because these are what I'm focusing that power towards, or AoE tanking because I'm going to focus the power towards these skills.
Yeah, for me, like same perspective in a general view. I think these traits should be available to all tanks. Why does the Warrior just have to be that mitigation tank that just does all the main tanking? Why can't he go and strap on 2 swords and dabble a bit of DPS and swing them around a bit, or take on a more offense stance or more of a support role? Give the guy a rest. The same goes for the Dire Lord. Let them step back a bit, or let them go into the tanking aspect and use that full force of AOE magic that they have at their disposal to go and lash out and pull these groups and hack and slash, or even take on the role of I'll swing a dual-handed broadsword and just go and lash out and do some DPS. Give them all this option. Let them because this gives people the ways to kind of be available regardless, because I'm fed up with being LFG for like hours on end because we can't fill that that last spot. We're looking for DPS, we're looking for this, we're looking for that, we're looking for a plate, or we're looking for a chain healer, or we're looking for a leather healer only. It goes for all the things. I'd love to take a second tank with me. And we've seen, the streams kind of do it as well. They've had, 2 tanks. I think it was the second stream they did. They had 2 tanks on there. And, why can't we do that? Why does it have to be like 1 tank in a group and then the rest is built off of DPS and your healer or 2 healers? I'd love to take, come along, Dire Lord, come along, Paladin, let's go and have fun. So that's how I kind of take it. We're going to go and move this on because we're getting close, and we have a lot more questions that kind of lead towards what we were going to talk about, ideas, thoughts, specializations. So I'm going to go and quickly jump right in. I'm going to go and skip these questions and bring them up if we have the time. So we kind of discussed ideas on what kind of specializations, what kind of things would make the Paladin feel different, and with the restrictions that I mentioned that I would like to see, how could we compensate that? How could we find a balance to make it kind of even? So let's go and have a look at it from we'll go and take a look at the healing aspect, where I said I don't want him to heal. Okay, so instead of having heals for the group and single targets, what if the Paladin had an additional bar kind of thing, like an extra mana bar, mana pool, whatever you want to call it, and by doing damage, you would basically fill up this bar, and then once it's full, you could either do like a single heal on a selected target, or you would do an AoE effect heal. That's basically, like we've seen in the streams, a little area, a circle, where you basically the group would get healed within that area of effect. Or you could even go the route of, instead of, doing a heal, he could add an additional benefits to the existing buffs that are on the group. Extend their lifeline, or add additional mitigation or hit points, or resists or reflects towards the group, so you have a better standing there. Something like that. That's kind of my way to go and say, hey, you can't, you're not a heal, or we're taking that right away from you, but you can still do that by obtaining this or going down this specialization and having this ability to have an extra bar where you'll still heal, but it's going to be limited. But you have to fill it up every time and everything. Do damage, and have a long cast or recast timer on it. So you got to fill that bar up, so it might take time depending on where you are and how the damage is coming in. So what about that kind of thing? What do you think about that idea? Is that something that would work? You like? You don't like?
Well, I think there's a couple ways that you can go about it. Like, that's like the rage system from WoW's Warriors. You could go with that, or you could go with the combo points, like with rogues. I know they also have energy, but just bear with me. It's been a while. I mean, you can do a lot of different things here to minimize what certain abilities are going out from that character, be it heals, aggro, AEs, whatever. It's up to VR to sit down and look at it and go, how is this balanced? And like say they can only, I'm just going to assume they can only tank. So VR is going to sit down and go, how does all of these mechanics in this one package that is the Paladin compare to the Warrior and the Dire Lord? Because you can't have this. You can't have it like a lot of these games where they just randomly throw nerfs in there. So this is the flavor of the month this week, and 3 or 4 weeks down the road they throw a nerf back again. Now this one's better, and you see people running 4 or 5 different style of classes. Like I played Warrior. I think I tried a Druid tank for a while in WoW, and the nerf bat situation really messes the game up. At its core, it messes it up. So regardless of what they choose, as long as they spend an awful lot of time balancing it, putting it through its checks and weights and all that, to just testing it out, I'm fine with whatever they choose.
What about you on the idea of a supplement to not being able to heal directly, but through a specialization you could obtain that to some limitation. Aries?
I love it. I think it would make a lot of players happy, the old school players, but still moving it into the 2017 century that we haven't seen that type of healer yet. And I agree with Lek. It just has to be something where they're not just going to nerf here and there, because I've also played a druid back in World of Warcraft, and when they nerfed it, you didn't see a druid on the server. So I would hate to see them just ruin a class like that. You want to make it so you'll see a good array of all classes.
So another thing that we kind of looked at, I just got to try and get my markings. What about, this is an idea actually from Aries, I think it was you who brought this one up, the ability to have support and CC capabilities by interrupting or occupying the encounters. So you could cast a constant stun on the encounter, have that as a specialization towards the Paladin, because we know the Paladin's going to have a lot of short-term buffs that he's going to be throwing out: reflex, stone skins, HP buffs, mitigation boosts and stuff like that. So what about adding a little support CC capability to the Paladin as well, where he's not really a true CC or support class in that form, but he can take that role on if need be. But he's going to have to, interact directly with that encounter. So it's not something he can go, boom, I cast that on there and I'm done. He's going to have to constantly make sure that he's occupying that encounter. And we'll start with you, Aries. What do you think about that?
I really like the idea. It reminds me of a Diablo Paladin back from Diablo 2, when they had charge and you'd hit him and you'd have to keep charging to keep him stunned. I like the idea, because his auras and things like that, he could continually buff, where he could still focus on that CC where he's hitting him and stunning him. I love that type of idea.
Quickly to interrupt, I've just been informed that by the looks of it, the chat bot isn't relaying properly, and we had problems earlier on before we went live. There seems to be a few mishaps with chat. We apologise. We hope that next time we stream it will be fixed. Thanks for bringing that up, Zath. Lex, what about you?
Well, this is where I'm going to get all the boos, because I don't think they should be able to do CCs at all. Nothing like that. The only way they should be able to CC is by off-tanking, which can be considered crowd control. Because we know we're going to have the Enchanter, that's probably going to be a specialist in crowd control. We're going to have the Bard, which is likely, very, very likely to have some kind of crowd control. Now we also got just regular DPS casters who have Root, which is a makeshift CC, which a lot of people will be familiar with. But now we've got the Rogue with some extra CC, that Smoke and Mirrors jazz that Kilson was using in the last stream. At this point, I think we've got more than enough CC. Right. And to add it to a tank, like say the Paladin, that means that either the Warrior or the Dire Lord's going to have to get it, or both of them, or because the one that doesn't get it's going to need something else.
Why? Why?
Because if he's got a shiny new truck, then I got to get a shiny new truck.
This isn't cookie cutter. This isn't this isn't free hands out, dude.
If he gets a shiny new ability, then I need to get something new. It doesn't have to be just like his, but it's got to be something that's going to make me feel good that I'm this class, that I spent all this time on. Note to
VR. Please create a Jester's cap, in purple pink colours with bubbles on top. Have that please as an item that I can basically force upon Lexa to wear, or have to wear, when he's in game in Pantheon, and have him run around in that, please.
Now for some reason I think someone from VR is watching us going, that's doable.
Right, so another cool, let's call this, what do they call their iconic abilities, I think is the right word.
Iconic.
So we have an iconic ability that we kind of thought about, or two actually. And this is also, I think, another idea of Ares, or actually a group effort. Last man kind of standing ability kind of thing. The main tank dies, for instance, and you've got a pally in a group. If he dies, the Paladin would have this little spell, a little clicky that he can click, and that would automatically give the Paladin a major mitigation boost, allowing him to take over regardless of the stance he's in for a very short period of time, allowing the healers to resurrect the tank and get, resituated. Would that be something that would suit as an iconic ability?
Yes. Simply because that's someone stepping up to protect the group.
Mm.
And that fits the Paladin to a T, in my opinion.
What about you, Ares?
Me, I didn't come up with that idea. It was
a group effort.
Yeah, I don't like that idea nearly as much as the other one that was brought up.
Mm.
Yeah, it would suffice, but the next one you're gonna go to here, that's the one that I think is just the essence of Paladin.
Alright, okay. So I'm going to bring up this, we'll call this the ultimate iconic ability. Now, as you know, earlier on I said that I do not want to see the Paladin have rezzing abilities regardless. But, as an iconic ability, he gets what we would call Righteous Sacrifice. And this is a spell that can go, we can use this multiple ways. I'll bring this up now. A spell that can be cast on any tank or healer in a group, as one example, as a death prevention spell, like we've seen, in EverQuest and EverQuest 2, certain classes had death prevention that they could cast. So this is something that he would technically do, and what this would do, this spell would surrogate their death to the Paladin. So let's say you've got a cleric in a group, you've cast that Righteous Sacrifice on the cleric. He gets smacked. He should technically be dead, but instead of him dying, you sacrifice yourself. That's being a Paladin. Now, to add to that, you could use it as a spell cast after death. So basically, what would happen is anyone in the group, be it a mage, a scout, a tank, a healer, would drop dead. Now, he could go and then cast this spell on them, and he would sacrifice his own life for theirs. So you would swap. So the tank's fallen, or the wizard's fallen down, or the monk, or whatever. He casts that spell on them, he resurrects them, brings them back to life, and then he drops dead. He's basically taking on that sacrifice for death.
I would like that over a res, because that's like say some, just the poop hits the fan, people. The healer dies, okay? Everyone else is still standing. You can use that to res your healer. Now, the Paladin keels over, cleric pops back up, obviously needs time to recover. Due to spawn times, you're not going to want to sit around forever and just waste time. You're going to want to med, you're going to want to go, get that Paladin back up so your healer can res him, wait, and then keep moving. But if it happens again, we'll say within an hour or two, maybe that ability's back, maybe it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea, because that's not just a humana swing. Oh, look, he's back alive. Even though every other healer can do that, and I'm just a tank. This is the Paladin basically saying, "Take my life, don't let them die," and then, the whole Halo polisher kind of mentality. So I think it fits. I like it.
What about you, Ares?
I love it. This is what I've been talking about earlier and everything, that your idea of this I would love to see in the game. I don't think we've ever seen it before, especially going with a Paladin. I think it'd be just awesome. I think new and fresh and just something new that we need to see. I think it'd be really just beneficial to do a new salt and pepper, as you said it, on the class itself.
Yep. So and another one that I can't remember if I brought that one up with the doing DPS, for instance. This could be something that he specializes on. He does DPS, hitting and through doing the DPS, similar to what we talked about earlier on with the extra bar. He would basically give out these auras to the group. So every time he's doing damage through DPS, he empowers the group with auras, giving additional support to mitigation, mana, HP, resistance, some kind of faith system kind of thing. It's something I like to see. Maybe a DPS stance. Add that as a specialization as well. That he can go into a DPS stance as a later ability, maybe to add some twist to the normal stances that your tanks are going to have. There's going to be you're most likely going to see a defense offense stance, so you could add like a DPS stance as a later specialization that they could go down to. So those were two other ideas we threw around, but I want to bring in some good questions still, because we still have, I think we've got about 5-10 minutes. I think we can do that, and we can get some questions from chatting. But I want to quickly see if there's... Yes, one question I want to quickly bring up, because this was brought up as well. The individual auras for the Paladin. Would you like to see different colours to them, depending on what kind of spell he's using? If it's being a heal spell, if it's being like a buff aura, something that's... given or used towards the enemy? Would you like to see different colours of auras depending on what he's doing as a paladin? If he's messing around in the cleric part of his self, if he's messing around with his own abilities, or messing around with abilities that reflect to the group, would you guys like to see some kind of identification marks towards that? And we'll start with you, Aries, because you're nodding your head, and so is Lexa now, but we'll start with you.
I think it's just smart to do that. I think back, Diablo 2 Paladins, where it was different animations, different colors, different everything. So if you came into a pug group, say you were just got brought in, I can visually see what he's using, so I don't use the same thing. So that way we get different benefits. I come in not knowing any of you guys, and I visually can see a different glowing or a different animations coming off, whether it be a Thorns aura or maybe a resistance buff or an armor buff. I can just see what it is and just know without even having to look at the stats.
What about you, Lex?
Oh yeah, like I'm going back to the Dire Lord one again, because to me they're the polar opposites. I basically said, for the love of God, give me auras. And I'm going to say the same thing for Paladins. Give them auras, because it just fits. Now, depending on the type of aura that they have, there should be different animations, different colors, whatever. And I'm not saying this big, gigantic bubble around your party that you constantly see. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying very, very subtle things. Like, if you have an aura that helps your party regenerate, then put it like a very soft, white, pulsing little glow to them, maybe. And I'm talking very minor. Like, you'd have to actually look at them and be like, oh my God, you're glowing. Not super in your face. But yeah, it's little things that are going to help everything. So should auras have different graphical things to depending on what they're doing? Hell yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I'd kind of like to see that as well, to some point, like you said, in very minor detail. But anyway, we have lots more, but we're strapping for time, so we're going to go now into the open chat, and I hope Shai was able to gather at least some questions that were brought in through chat, or ideas that we can quickly, briefly touch on. So Shai, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Well, for the most part, there weren't really... It was more comments than anything else, not so much questions. So, did you want me to just go ahead and bring up some of the better comments then?
Yeah.
Okay, well, starting off, Svarti mentioned where they live in tunnels, perhaps for dwarves, would make their spears their go-to weaponry.
That makes sense to me.
Strap 8, I think the races that can play clerics would have the ability to eventually turn from their cleric path and become a paladin.
Okay.
Oh, I would like that, because that adds diversity.
Definitely.
It adds a little bit of interesting story to your character and kind of changes your story up, your personal story. I like it.
That could also work with the, towards the progeny as well.
Yeah, so you have a cleric, you retire your cleric, your progeny is a paladin now. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do, and I'm still really on the fence with the progeny system.
So carry on, Shay.
And from Catharsis 22, do you think we'll see enough paladins in the world if we only have 2 races to play with?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there are a lot of diehard paladin fans out there.
And
I'm not
I
saying
think-
that's a bad thing, so stop thinking it.
And to be honest,
My wife just gave me a finger. She's a
even-
diehard paladin.
even in EverQuest 2, I think the most picked races for Paladin were either, I think it was like human, dwarf, and barbarian. I think those were the most picked, or the most picked in EverQuest 2, at least on my servers that I've been on, were paladins. You know, I've hardly ever seen a troll paladin or an ogre paladin, or well, ogre's obviously a given, but you know, I haven't seen somebody like take a wood elf and be a paladin, or a high elf, or or maybe a gnome, but dwarf and human, I think, is the ideal choice, and I don't think there'll be that many limitations because people love dwarves apparently.
Yeah, people love them dwarfs.
You want to add to that as well, Aries, or?
Yeah, I think if you think back, like even original WoW, when if you remember, like shaman could only be one faction of one race, and you saw plenty of them around. I don't think that limiting the race of it is going to affect your class at all. I think you'll see plenty of them out there.
Yeah. So Shy.
And again from Catharsis 22, maybe have heals with the rescue ability. And then from Svarti, I would like to have the melee paladin to be zoned on the ground, so that it would be almost like a point blank AOE radiating from him that procs on the mobs. Kind of like for the auras.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in my book. That's the only way auras would ever work.
Yeah.
Point blank AE around the caster.
And
I like the
again,
visual though on the ground, like in Diablo, where you can see it on the ground, not glowing on your character, but it's glowing on the ground for your auras.
And again from Svarti, he mentions perhaps having the warrior, in order to do AoE, he must equip a two-hander, and that way he would lose some mitigation from the shield in order to do the damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that does make complete sense.
Yep, definitely.
And then from Ex Moco, maybe the bar can have the bar that you were speaking of that you would fill up slightly. Maybe the bar could have percentages where you could do 2 actions at 50% and perhaps be it stronger at 100% filled.
Yeah, that could also work. You know, there's definitely room to speculate and join in and add to these ideas, and not just ours. Anybody can come up with stuff, and definitely room for that. It's just this is just a pure basic thoughts and ideas that we threw out the top of our head, and there's definitely room to go even further with everything that we've talked about on almost all our shows, and there's definitely lots of stuff out there. So yeah, definitely, that's another good way to look at it as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're actually doing the show. I mean, yeah, we have a lot of experience between usually the 3 or 4 of us that are on here in terms of what's been out, but we're by no means like the definitive source of ideas. We're here to try to spark the ideas, because maybe one of you guys out there are going to come up with this just
idea,
mind-blowing, fantastic idea, take it to the forums and change the way we're looking at Pantheon completely.
Like that Lawkeeper idea.
Yeah.
Boom! It blew everybody's mind.
Yep. That's why we're here.
Yep.
Not because of that fat paycheck that your Nella sends me every week. Which, by the way, you're late. I want my 12 cents, please.
All right.
And finally, there's just one last question that I've seen so far from Arc Nightmare about maybe if they do have any crowd control, maybe just have it useful for undead.
Yeah, that's an option too. I did note a lot of comments, and I forget who said it, so sorry. If paladins do heal, they would like to see that they're only self that are self only. If they can only be tanks, I am for that. I like that. Or maybe a small heal that's just, randomly in your group or something. But I'm very on the fence with a lot of Paladin designs in games, because in almost every game out there, a Paladin has always been complete overkill because you have a tank and a healer meshed into one. And that's always a recipe for imbalance, because no one spends the time to balance it correctly. He either heals too much or he has such high mitigation. So being able to say, yeah, you can self-heal, I'd like it, because that means you can no longer be the safeguard of your group. It's just, I can keep myself alive. But depending on how the aggro is done with the Paladin, that could also still cause major imbalance.
Yep. So anyway, we have a lot more written down, or a few more questions written down and everything, but we're gonna have to basically come to the end segment of the show, because we're trying to limit it in time, because we all have jobs or other things to do as well. But so I'm gonna go and quickly bring up the announcements again. Like I said, Brad, your t-shirt's on its way to you. Trust me, this is fake. I'll prove it to you right now. There you go. It's just a normal t-shirt.
We expect to see picture on Twitter of you wearing the shirt.
And again, we've tried to find ways to get you all more involved, because we would definitely like to have you on the shows. We'd like to interview anybody that wants to come on the show and do an interview with us. And if you want to help us out with content to fill the shows, the individual shows that we do, we came up with this document that you can acquire either in the official forums from Pantheon in our fan site section. It's on our website, it's in our Discord. On the forums there's a description on how to go about it. In our Discord there's a description on how to go about it. Basically, you can go to the Google Drive, download this PDF document, you open it up, you start typing, off you go. You put the show number in there that you would relate to the calendar that we currently do not actually have, because we only have one more show left. But the next calendar that comes out, you'll see the show number on there, you'll see the topic, you'll see the date when it's aired, so you fill that out. Then you do what we've done, write your questions in the question box, write your ideas and thoughts in this box. You then go and save the file, and then send it back to me again, either via email or directly through our Discord. And I'll type my email again once more in chat for you guys to get involved. We would definitely like to see people join in and help us structure these shows, and hear your thoughts as well, because this is all about you. It's not about the voice of Terminus or just us guys doing the show regularly. It's about the community. It's all about the community. We want to get your ideas.
Whoa.
What?
I thought this was all about me.
And the way this works, basically, with this document, to briefly finish it up,
I can only read won't.
If you do fill it out, make sure you always send it the latest the Tuesday before we do that show that you're addressing. The Tuesday before that show is when I have to have the document back, because we're going to go through there and pick out all the best questions, ideas, and then bring out the final format for us to do the show. And we'll keep them basically archived, and if we do have more information or something new that's been revealed and we do the second show, we'll bring up these additional questions that you have. So have at it, and hopefully you guys can help us come up with some cool ideas, some cool topics. Even if you've got a topic, like for instance, you can even use that to come up with an idea for a topic for us to discuss, and then give us some working points ready to go with that. So that's a way to get you more connected to us and more involved, because it's we want your input. We want you on the show if you want to be on the show, and to help us out with that. Now, disclaimer again. We are not developers. We are not paid by VR to do our shows. We're here just to show off, support towards them, to help promote their game, talk about it, get people interested, and like Lex already said best, to spark ideas through the discussions that we do, engaging each other here. We want to help you maybe get that idea that's going to be seen by the devs, and they said, well, that's absolutely awesome, we want to get that in the game, or would like to have that in the game, or something like that. And also to help the devs, when they have a blockade, because they're only human as well, they ain't magicians yet, to help them maybe see something from a different perspective, or to add to what they're trying to finish, so to help them there. So that's the disclaimer. And final thoughts, guys. Lex, before we go to Aries, your final thought.
Well, I'm not a Paladin expert. I'm not even going to pretend to be a Paladin expert here. I would just like to see them have their own specialties. I would like to see them have a seat at the tanking table, because I'm a tank. I love tanks. I have a brotherhood kind of set up between all my other fellow tanks. And I don't want to see them overpowered. I don't want to see them underpowered. I want to see them on the level of everybody else. I want to see them with abilities that fit their lore, that fit what it actually means in Terminus to be a paladin. And also, I'm going to put a little plug in here for Aries for being kind enough to join us on the show today. If you guys do enjoy seeing that beautiful face of his, if you're interested in maybe watching more of him, he is a streamer. He streams in support of police because he is a policeman. You can find him at Beam, Twitch, and YouTube, I believe. Aries with 2 S's _ blue line, 1 word, or was it 2 words?
Ooh, I think it's different on both of them, actually, because one was taken. So I will, if you're interested, feel free to get a hold of me, or Lack, he'll get you the info.
Yeah, if you're interested, drop me a message in Discord. I'll lead you to the right place. And I'm just gonna end my final thought with saying thank you, Aries, for joining us. You gave us a good perspective on all this, because I certainly don't have much in the way of Paladin.
So your final thoughts, Aries?
My final thoughts is I think these Pallies have to be able to heal. I want to see a Pally healer. I play healers. I love Paladins. I love the playstyle. I want to see them be able to heal. And then I can use my sign where it says, my Pally won't heal Lecky.
Nice. I was wondering what I was saying.
Yeah, so it was great having you on the show. We hope you guys enjoyed the show as well. We're going to try and bring out, this kind of format to you on the regular basis now, where we lock it down and try not to bounce too much off off each other, because we've been doing this now for over a year, and we've been pretty good so far, being able to bounce off ideas off the bat, back and forth. But we are definitely getting to a point where we're struggling to come up with new, fresh ideas, content to do. That's why we want to get you more involved to help us out there. And every Thursday when we stream, 4 p.m. Eastern, and we will see you all next Thursday. Next Thursday is the final show for May. Then we have the Tavern Talk on Tuesday, obviously. But it'll be the final discussion show for May. I should have the new calendar out by then. I also just linked the Google Drive document directly into the chat, where you can get a hold of it. Join our Discord server. You want to discuss stuff with us, hang out with a cool bunch of people. We have guildies and non-guildies alike in our Discord, chatting away with us and hanging out. So anybody's welcome. And next Thursday is our first raid discussion. So if you have any ideas on raids or what you would like to see, use that document, send it our way, and we'll prepare that for the show on Thursday. And again, thanks Shai and Zathris for being awesome